Welcome to our first podcast. I'm Roxy Condry, and here with our RAIN team are thrilled to kick off a brand new series with you. If you love real estate, development updates, community stories, and behind-the-scene insights into life here on the coast, then you're in the right place. This is our very first episode, and we're launching a series about something that's really making some waves here in Ocean Springs real estate market. It's short-term rentals. You've probably noticed some homes popping up as vacation stays and weekend getaways, and you might have a few questions. So today, we're diving into the short-term rental scene, where they're allowed, how they're performing, how they're impacting the local economy and real estate market. We'll also explore what this trend means for homeowners, investors, and visitors alike. So each month, we'll bring you fresh content on everything from what's happening in the local market, like short-term rentals and new developments, to inside tips on buying, selling, and everything in between. And since the podcast is for you, we certainly want to hear from you. If there are any topics you'd like to cover, let us know. We want to cover the things that matter most to you. Later in the episode, we'll also dive into the recent NAR settlement, changes to the commission structure, and what that means to you as a buyer or seller. So stick around. Let's get started. Today, we're kicking off with a deep dive into the short-term rental market in Ocean Springs, why it's growing, how it benefits the community, and some considerations from those thinking about getting into it themselves. As some of you may know, last night we had a planning commission meeting, so we thought it would be a great place to start by getting into some of the comments that came in during that. Alan, do you want to fill us in on what you heard last night?
Well, just a lot of contention, I guess, about what the rules are, a lot of confusion. And this is just Ocean Springs specific we're talking about, obviously, but just where we've come from in the last few years with residential permits, with these overlay districts, with the unlimited amount of commercial permits allowed in short term, kind of what's changed. And, really, I think it's just been a lack of kind of a clear picture from the city for a number of years. And just we've kind of added things and taken them away and just left the general public, I think, confused in the most part, and a lot of pushback, whether it's valid or not, about how they're impacting a community. It's just a lot of the perception of it, and that's kind of the way things have gone. In the comments on it, you see things from both sides of it. A lot of people are saying our market's taking a dip. I think that's very dependent on the type of unit it is. There are still people definitely investing and doing well on short-term rentals in Ocean Springs. I think there's still a lot of properties that you could do that, but I do think because of the way that the market's evolved and changed, it's gotten really complicated. It's really, necessary to be informed of where you can do it, where you can't do it. And you also need to be aware of the potential pushback from your neighbors, because you don't want to just go into something where you're fighting someone to get it done. You want people to be excited about it, and you want to be able to show them that this is a good asset for them and for their community around them. But that was just a lot of the concerns about how it's breaking down neighborhoods, which, we can talk a little bit about that.
I think that'd be great. I also think, just for the people that are maybe new to short term, just to start with some of the high level, things as far as, yes, short term rentals are allowed now in Ocean Springs through a permitting process. I think some of the main, which districts, if it's residential versus commercial. So if anybody wants to speak to that, how many are allowed?
In the residential district, I think the number right now is 115. I don't know, actually, if they voted on that to raise that. I think it was 65 years ago, and it's basically moved up pretty much every 6 months since then to 115. At the same time, they've created these overlay districts, the Porter Avenue district and the downtown overlay. And in both of those districts, you can have unlimited short-term rentals. In reality, most of those properties were already zoned commercial, so they were, most of them were already allowed by right. Commercial permits don't count. And those districts did add a few residential properties, but not as many as people think. While we're mentioning this, we should notice, we say Ocean Springs, but Ocean Springs to the outside world, Gulf Hills, St. Martin, and Gulf Park Estates, in that area, those don't require a permit. The city doesn't have any regulation outside the city limits.
Not needed.
So you've got maybe
districts.
20 more in Gulf Hills, 50 more in Bellefontaine Beach, and down there in Gulf Park Estates. None of that is actually Ocean Springs short-term rental, so that doesn't count.
We're just talking city limits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so ultimately, I think, just summarize that up, is it's allowed in Ocean Springs through a process that's been created through the city. The city limits are the only thing that we're talking about. If you're in a residential district, you're going to have to go through a certain type of permitting process. If you're in a commercial district, you're going to need to go through a different process, but it doesn't have the cap that the residential districts are carrying. And currently, we have that number at 115. And I was under the impression those are currently taken, but as someone drops off or doesn't pay for the following year, things like that open up additional permits for people to come into the residential districts. And we've seen that happen year after year.
And that fee has gone up every year, and they've made it up to where it's now $500. And their intention with doing that, although they did it on the commercial side too, which doesn't make sense, but their intention in doing that was to drive those permits that people weren't using to provide them for people that are. Because there are a number of folks, and we probably know them, that have these short-term permits, don't really use them. They just keep them because they're scared there's going to be this permanent cap and they'll never be able to use it. So that kind of does affect those people that are investing to do it as a short term.
Another question I think that comes up a lot with realtors that reach out to us and buyers that reach out to us is we do so many condo sales, is not every condo association allows for short-term rentals. Actually, most of them don't. And so knowing what the bylaws are, regulations with each community is really, really important because it might seem like a killer deal in a great spot, but you don't want to get into that process, you know, with blindfolded, not knowing that it's not allowed. And so really important to know in those condo communities, how they're not just how they're zoned, because they could still be in a commercial district and still not allow for short-term rentals. And so it's important to know.
So we could give some examples of that.
Yeah, I would love to go through. I think people are constantly asking which condo associations allow for short-term rentals, because typically that's where it's going to be regulated. Like you said, the zoning might allow for it, but the HOA has decided it's not something they want in the community.
For instance, I mean, it changes community to community. So downtown, we have Guyton Place, which has been around for a while and people really love it. Great location off the Porter. And their regulation's 30 days. So you have to rent if you're gonna rent, it has to be 30 days or more. The Porter condos, which we're actively selling now, those are in the overlay district and the bylaws allow for any rental. So there's no minimum or maximum days. Also no cap within the community on how many folks could do an investment property or short-term rental.
That's probably the most wide open one
Gulf
right now,
Oaks.
what you
Gulf
said.
Oaks is one that
Gulf Oaks
people
is
always want to do that there.
Yeah, but
And
they
the bylaws
can't.
are definitely not going to do it. The inlet, also the bylaws do not allow
What's the
it.
minimum at Gulf Oaks? Is it
I
30
think-
day or is it?
6 months.
6 months, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're super strict about it.
6 months.
I would not advise people buy them to be rental property.
Absolutely not.
They're great, it's a great place to live.
Gulf Oaks is a great primary residence, and yeah, you can
Yes.
do year leases there. I guess 6 months technically, but typically year leases.
Or buy one and rent it out because later on you plan to move there or something if you want to go ahead.
That's a
and
good
rent
investment. DeSoto Place is one we left out, and
Yeah.
that does allow for short-term rentals. So ultimately, you've got the Porter, DeSoto Place, and OS 1515 is the one that we're currently selling. It certainly offers that they're going to be doing it more like a condotel, which will be associated with the hotel rental program, and that one is in the commercial district, and the HOA certainly
And
allows it.
we've seen, like at DeSoto Place, where folks have been doing short-term rentals there for the last couple of years. So there's a lot of good data with DeSoto on what that rental would look like, you know, occupancy, profitability, things like that. Things like OS 1515, which is such a killer development, where we have 14 condos, 10 of them under contract, and all 10 are planning on doing those as investment properties. It's gonna be really neat to see how that changes I think it's gonna change the market, Ocean Springs, certainly for what the, like the luxury state could be.
Absolutely. There's one too that we didn't touch on, which is the condos at Glen. Are those, I don't know if those allow for it.
Those don't allow short-term, do
I think
they?
they're 30-day minimum.
30-day minimum? Okay, so
Yeah.
I think that covers all.
That's
the condo
Gulfport
complexes.
Estates?
No, that's Fort Myers.
Harbor.
Oh, okay, the Harbor Landing also doesn't.
Harbor Landing's
Harbor
not
Lake
technically-
in the county.
Yes,
Uh,
we're
True.
technically in the city limits.
And then what's the?
The ones
Oak
by,
Harbor. Is that Oak
by
Harbor?
Bayou.
Oak Cove.
Oak Cove.
Yeah.
Oak Cove is not
Oak
allowed.
Cove does not allow them either.
Yeah, so that leaves you with OS 1515, the Porter, DeSoto Place, if you're looking to buy one in Ocean Springs.
Yeah.
And technically
condo.
cottages, I guess, are condos.
The
That's
cottages
true.
are
That's
condos. That's a
Cottages,
good
which I
point.
think there's one listed right now,
Is there
2-bedroom.
in Ocean Springs?
Yeah.
And it's not transferable, right?
That's
No,
right.
they're not
They're not
transferable.
transferable.
Which is very important if you're looking at a residential zone more than, because in commercial, you're by right, so you can get the permit. But if it's residential, you're going back to the back of the queue. So if there's a line, you're going to be waiting.
And that does come up. So
Yeah.
unless,
That's a
I
good
guess,
point.
I don't know if you buy an LLC, if you could transfer it that way, but ultimately, yes, as it transfers, it's supposed to be a new permit. So that would be what you need to look into, is getting one set up.
Do we know how many there are total, like in the city limits?
I don't, because
Short
the
term.
commercial ones, they,
Changes so much.
yeah.
But if you really look at it, like the Borough of Washington's how many are 1,700?
Mhm.
And we have 115 residential permits, and I would say maybe double that in the commercial side, if that.
Mhm.
So, we're really not taking a dent as far as the city of Ocean Springs. Now, if you start including the county and you start including other parts, then maybe you're building that. But I mean, we all saw
Yeah.
the city was just trying to push a 80-room hotel downtown. So I mean, they're trying to actively get more rooms down here. I mean,
And one of the things that we look at that I think is really important too is we have to look at the data to see like what is the occupancy, how has that shifted over the last couple of years. I mean, we've seen a boom in our real estate business of people wanting to do short-term investments. There's a website called AirDNA, and I definitely suggest if you're a buyer and you're thinking about dipping your toe in the market to get a subscription to that because it's really data heavy, pulls from Airbnb.
where's the calls?
I'll screenshot everything, or VRBO, and it does give you an overview. So it can say, okay, you're looking at Ocean Springs. You can zoom in on the map and see like the revenue that some of these places that are marketed are getting, but it gives you the bigger numbers too. So our average over 12 months occupancy right now is 51%. The average nightly rate is 290, and in the luxury market, it goes to 309. And it shows other stuff too that I think is really interesting. Like it does show you make 8% more if you have a professionally managed rental as opposed to self-managing. So all that kind of stuff is really important to look at.
And I do think it's a little dangerous to just look at the data, I think, because I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence from what the property is, where the property is, size of the property. I don't necessarily think the higher end luxury Airbnbs are doing as well here as they would in some other markets. I think our smaller ones would typically have much higher occupancy rates than that, stay booked almost year round, like around the 80% mark. And I guess that's anecdotal, but I firmly believe it's true.
You have a short-term rental.
Yeah,
And so you have in downtown.
in
and
downtown.
You have the ability to kind of control like your bookings.
I do,
because-
yeah, which I am looking for someone to take that over. So when we first had it and we were pricing, really know what I was doing, and to kind of help me, I was pricing a little low. We were just like steadily booked out during the week, during the weekends, which was a lot to kind of keep up with, so I raised the prices. And so we're always booked on the weekends, a lot of 3-day weekends, and then festivals, which is a sweet spot for me. I'm happier that way, where it's just not a constant. But if I could lower it and be so much more booked out, but I would probably say 50% is pretty accurate for that, but I kind of have it
That's
set that
your
way.
goal. Yeah.
And that's a good point too. I think, a lot of people think it's like a set it and forget it type of thing, and it's really not. Like you either need to actively manage it or turn it over to somebody that
Exactly.
does. It's just like basically anything else in life. You can't just passively.
Well, and I think that's my concern. I don't deal as much with, as you all do in condos. I deal more in in homes and in primary residences. And then people in my world, I think they romanticize the VRBO market or having a short-term rental. And I think sometimes they get a little bit, I think there's a sweet spot also in your return, and that's kind of our responsibility with our clients is fiscal. So you want them to get, if they decide they're going to do this, it can't be necessarily a $500,000 house that you want to live in. But are you doing this for the return? Well, I think the smaller properties, and this is the same thing in my opinion for long-term rentals, is if you get in lower and you can manage it better, you'll make your return. I think we're seeing some properties, it sounds like, return to the market where
Yeah.
they're not making their return. Do you all see it more in your properties, your
I do agree with
Short-term
that. And I think
rentals.
that maybe the management side of it wasn't like fully ready to accept what it took to do that.
Yeah.
And, talking about the return too, I purchased one in Ocean Springs after actively scouring like Orange Beach Gulf Shores, because I
Yeah.
wanted a place there. But the return to me never made sense.
Never made sense.
Compared to what you get here. I wanted it there because I want a place.
You want to use,
But I
right?
didn't, I looked at the numbers and I'm like, at best, I thought I was going to be breaking even.
Yeah.
Especially when I was looking, which I think the market's gone down from now. I think buying, 2 years ago over there, all those people probably are at a break-even point, unless I'm just very wrong about it. But in Ocean Springs, that's not been the case at all. I would say if you do it right, it's a very profitable and not super difficult to do
And
that.
some people's goals are different too. So that's the other thing. It's exactly what you're both touching on is there might be a client of ours that says, my goal is to have cash flow. And then that property looks very different than my goal is to have a second home.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And maybe when I'm not here, I can offset some of the cost. And that's a totally different,
Yeah.
typically
You don't
different
care
piece
what
of
you're
property.
making, you can buy whatever you want, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think y'all have all made like a really good point, and then you really have to look at it from like a full picture in that, with you increasing the rate and not having as many bookings and still making more money, people need to realize like that all has to take into
Yeah.
account. And you're talking about the housekeeping for each turn, you're talking about the wear and tear on the property.
Wear and tear.
And so a lot of times, as you do look at increasing the price of those, there's a term RevPAR, but ultimately that would give you a higher RevPAR, which means more revenue for your property. And so ultimately, I think that part is something that as agents, we can kind of look at too and try to find the properties that we feel like will be the best return for your money. And there's a lot of properties here, like you mentioned in Ocean Springs, that do have potential to actually do more than break even. But you do need to be looking at it from a perspective of not just an occupancy
Right.
and a rate, because manipulating those can actually change the overall pro forma and make it a
Right.
better investment overall.
And one of the biggest things we have here, and we're probably going to face next year as well, is the cost of insurance. And that's not just us, that's
Yes.
pretty much this whole coastal area. But knowing that you're probably going to be facing a different number on that you're going to have to factor in for your insurance after these storms that we've had this year.
Well, and that's a great point. I think that, again, is something we're knowledgeable about. We can help
Mhm.
with trying to navigate that side of it, because it's certainly something on the coast that we have to deal with, we
Right.
all know, and it certainly changes your bottom line. So, coming into it with information is going to allow you to make good
And
sound
as your
decisions.
property goes up, you have to insure it for more. right?
Absolutely,
That's what's
right.
happening.
Yeah.
So given the meeting last night, the planning meeting, what could change, what were people's issues and what could change as a result of night's meeting? Was it just people stating
Well, I think just
any
people.
concerns, or was it,
They're
was there, is there
concerned. I
a
mean,
change up for debate?
I don't, fundamentally to me, I have a hard time with, regulation in general. And I think if we don't regulate long-term rentals. And to me, I can drive around town and I can tell you where a long-term rental is. When you see a short-term rental, that property is kept up to it. If they're trying to actually use it and run it, they keep it up.
Yeah.
They maintain it. Whereas some of these long-term rentals in streets that the people have owned for a long time, they could sell very, very quickly, but they probably have the same tenant in them, which is
Yeah.
great. You establish community that way, but the houses themselves are not kept up to the standard of those around them. So that's where I have a difficult time with kind of
Not regulating
differentiating.
long-term.
Like you think
trying to
long-term should be regulated, or?
He's saying
No, I don't-
don't, so
think
why are
it's
we
neither
talking
should.
about?
Right.
If it was up to me, I wouldn't regulate anything.
Right.
But, I think that was one of the big things, is that people just don't think, they think it hurts the community. They think there's like a stigma of like partying and issues. But if you look at existing covenants, like we talked about, like Gulf Oaks, like they're never going to do it. And they love it. The people there love it, and the place is a great place to live, and they don't want that at all, which is great. There's a lot of communities, like I live in Cherokee Glen. I think 100%, if you were to do that neighborhood right now, you would have covenants that would not allow short-term rentals. But because it's 100 years old, they didn't have this thought that this is going to be an issue, so it's never been addressed.
Yeah.
Fort Bayou would be another one that's like, I don't think that neighborhood would ever have allowed it if it was an issue at the time that they were putting in covenants.
Right.
And so that's unfortunate that we're kind of like behind trying to catch up with this issue that wasn't an issue at the time. But I don't really know how you do a referendum on that for the individual community. Like, I believe in giving those subdivisions their rights and their ability to dictate that, like they do with any other HOA laws.
Maybe grandfather
But
in.
adding them in or like protecting them, they're asking the city to do that, and when the city does it, it's like a broad stroke, and then it's kind of gets a little murky. So it's a very difficult process.
Go to those meetings or listen to them on YouTube as they're being, going live. just to kind of keep up with exactly that, like what is changing? Where can we find this information? I mean, I think they do have the downtown map on the city's website now. You can zoom in, you can see everything now. So that's been a nice
They said
change.
last night at the meeting, I think that they were actually, they were listed somewhere online now, but I don't know if that's in.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
As well, the actual units.
So is there any change up for debate with planning, or
This
is
thought
there?
extended from a couple of applications,
Okay.
like that conversation was.
And the applications are always up for review during those meetings, right?
When they have openings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the neighbors are alerted when somebody,
Yeah, you get
right,
the-
they can come
Yeah.
in, they can.
And, you
Yeah,
know,
and I think it would be helpful if you want to cruise through that just quick process on,
of the application?
yeah, the application process. Because from our client standpoint, because I think they don't even know where to go to get the permit
So on the
documents.
commercial side, it's, the applications are basically the same. But on the commercial side, you go in, you turn it in. It's very self-explanatory. It's very easy what you need to do. Just a couple of things like have your fire hydrant. I don't think we have.
Hardwired light.
Hardwired light, first aid kit. Do we do first aid kit here? No, we don't. Okay. So fire extinguisher, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide if you have gas, hardwired light.
No extension cords.
Yeah, there's a few different things, but they're really
They're all
good about
outlined. It's
working with you and getting with you.
And
So
they
you turn it
turn
in.
with each one.
you know,
How much is
you
the
know,
permit? And
$500.
And do they collect that upon the application?
Yes.
or-
So, or it's
They won't
501.
schedule, you won't have your permit, you won't have your
So you
appointment.
pay for it, then they set up the inspection. But the inspectors are, I mean, they're not your enemy. They're just trying to tell you
No,
what you
they,
need to
they're.
do.
And they're not gonna come until there's an opening?
Yeah, you need to be as close.
You need to be
You need to
ready.
think you're good to go.
So if
You need to have your boxes labeled too.
If your
electric
numbers,
boxes.
Yeah,
I think what you're saying though is you actually fill out the paperwork and turn it in with a check for $500.
even if you're on the wait
And you
list.
were put on a
Yes.
wait list. And then whenever you're,
If you're commercial, you'll just go right to the inspection process when they're available.
you don't have to get on the wait list.
Okay.
yeah, and so then once they have a spot comes, then you'll be responsible for having each of the items that are listed on the application completed in your property and ready for the inspection. And then once they do the inspection, you actually get the permit in order to allow you to do the short-term rental.
And that's when they'll catch that $500 check?
Yes.
And I can honestly
Uh-huh.
see like something coming out of last night is being the city goes up again on residential. Makes
Yeah.
that more expensive, maybe keeps commercial a little cheaper if they're trying to drive them to commercial. That was originally the intent, and they raised the commercial. But I think a positive to the city that we haven't talked about as much is, I'm going to use the cottage as an example because we sold it out and we know it really well and we both own one. The taxes on that piece of property where the cottage is at Oak Park were like $17,000 for
Yeah,
the
this is-
entire piece of property. When they were individually sold off, now you're looking at, I don't even know the exact number, but I bet it's around $200,000 in property taxes. So that's the difference right there. So you're talking, what is that, 125
Yes.
times?
It was a punch in the face.
Plus, I'm paying probably $20 a night in occupancy tax that goes to this. So that's another $600 a month for basically
Each of those.
each of those cottages every night. So it is a massive, massive influx of money for them.
Another thing that we were looking at earlier was, we looked back, I think that it was like a 3-year, set of points, and it showed short-term rentals have increased in Ocean Springs by 15% in 3 years. It feels like a lot more than that.
Yeah,
Like
It
when
does.
I look at
It
it.
does feel like more.
But I don't know if the data, what it
Is
is.
that
but
just
that's-
residential? That's just gotta be residential, right?
It's resident, no, it's anybody that has a
Okay.
39564 zip code that's marketing on Airbnb.
So that's what's nice on Air DNA, that one, did I say that right? Air
Mm-hmm.
DNA. It's gonna capture the ones that aren't necessarily in that cities, it's all in the zip code. So it's nice that that data, Harbor Landing is a good example, or
Right.
Goldfields, all of
Bellefontaine
those.
Beach,
are
which
gonna be
is,
Bellefontaine.
they do a lot of really
I
nice.
have a lot out there for
nice-
sale if anyone
beach.
has. Gulf side.
Which one of yours do better? Do y'all know, have a grasp on what properties do well? Aside.
My Airbnb is
Your-
I just have a
Your
cottage.
personal does
Yeah.
great. Your
It does
cottage
really well.
Great. I mean, I
Well,
think,
that's where Air DNA will come into play too,
Yeah.
because you can actually get into the numbers
See.
based on, like, you could zoom into areas and check the numbers. So I think that would be important, because I think to Alan's point, every property is going to be very unique. So I don't think you can really like blanket it. You've got to look at the individual house, how many bedrooms it has, what neighborhood it's in.
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of factors are going to play into
if you
it.
have one in the Destin or Gulf Shores or something, you're looking at it because you're also using it when it's not used, right? And
Yeah.
you know, having one in Ocean Springs, to me, I'm very motivated to constantly manage it and work it. And so it does do very well, but I never want it to really sit there
Sit.
because I'm not going to use it otherwise. It's totally an investment property, but, and you come.
When you've rented yours out a few times too,
Yeah.
long-term.
So I've done the snowbirds, you know, and that's a good thing. But I'm not doing that this year. I've already seen bookings for the winter. So when people say like we're saturated, I have no concern about them raising the limit personally, like as it affecting
Pretty good
me
testament.
or my clients.
Well, we have a smaller Airbnb, you know, so price-wise, it's a good value. So I think, you know, they do
And that's
look up.
what I want to do is provide like the most like affordable option in still the downtown area because I want people to come and experience this and I want people to see what Ocean Springs is and that's very rewarding for me. So like I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Um,
That's another component to it too, though, when you look at Airbnb, you
Absolutely.
search these cities and you know these cities and you look at you look at a property that's like, this is not where you would want to stay.
Yeah.
And if
Right.
it's out of county, there's no regulation. I know it's in the county, there's no regulation in
And
that.
being so familiar with Ocean Springs, like I'm terrified about other municipalities because I've seen how much ours has changed. And I
Yeah,
know that if you're not like really in the know,
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
really get yourself in a lot of trouble in one of these
Yeah.
properties. So
Well, and I like
Like
to
New Orleans,
communicate
for
with
example.
like
yeah,
our guests. I have a list I put together of like, go to this restaurant this time of day, go to
Yeah.
Sunset Lounge
Yep.
for, you know, Sunset Cocktails, check out East Beach, you gotta go to Shearwater, all the things that people that aren't from here don't really know about.
Right.
So, you know, I like to send them on a little tour of all the fun places. I wouldn't be able to do that.
And we've
Another market.
seen people that have come into Ocean Springs, stayed at hotels or at Airbnbs or whatever, and they'll come a couple times, you know, a couple years in a row, and then they start to look to buy.
They want for
And
sure.
They like, have their, you know, pulse on what they're looking for. They've experienced the downtown, they've experienced Shearwater, all the cool stuff. And so we have definitely seen people like try it before they buy a situation.
My neighbors just did
I
that.
think our downtown
Seen that a
boutique
lot.
hotels have like exposed so many more people to this area that wouldn't have.
Yeah.
People that otherwise would have like passed through to go to Fairhope
yeah.
or Madisonville or something like that. Like we've become, to me, I think that area that it's really nice.
Yeah, I totally
Oh,
agree.
really thank for that, but
Yeah.
I think we can kind of start, I know we can talk about short-term rentals forever, but I do agree. And I think kind of ending on that note, you know, there's obviously going to be a lot of discussion on the best way to regulate the short-term rentals. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of work on the city's part to try to, you know, balance that. But at the end of the day, the short-term rentals, I totally agree. It's the reason we got in the hotel industry as well as the real estate industry is because it was incredible to see how we can open, you know, the doors to letting people see how special Ocean Springs is, because it truly is a place that I think people should visit and see because it's unique and it has so many different opportunities for people to experience everything from the beach, the water, to downtown shopping. And the short-term rentals are really allowing that to just expand and more people to be able to come and visit and see what makes this coast special. So I certainly see the silver lining on that aspect of it. As far as the financial side, I know if anyone's interested in getting into them, we are all, you know, keeping up with those numbers and following the trends. So we'll be able to update all of our clients on how this opportunity may or may not be for them.
Exactly.
So, all right. Before we wrap up, a quick note on the recent hot topic, the National Association of Realtors settlement with the Department of Justice. If you're a buyer or seller, you're probably wondering, what does this mean for me? The settlement actually will bring more transparency to the real estate commissions. Historically, sellers covered both their agent and the buyer agent's commissions. But now there's more flexibility in how these commissions are handled. This could lead to shifts in the market with more options for buyers and sellers. For sellers, what we're seeing is a more competition among the agents. So it's crucial to evaluate the value of your agent and your agency's offers. Also, things like knowing when you should or should not market a buyer broker fee should be discussed. And for buyers, you'll have a clear insight into what your agent is being paid, the services they are providing, and all of this will be disclosed and agreed upon before you even start touring a home. An experienced, proven professional agent that understands the market has never been more important. The key takeaway is there are opportunities, and having an agent that knows how to navigate this landscape to maximize your purchase and selling power is really paramount. So reach out. We're here to help. I really appreciate you tuning in to this first episode. We cannot wait to see you next month. Let us know in the comments what you'd like us to cover, and be sure to subscribe for more real estate tips and market updates. Until next time.